And we're live. It is Monday, the 30th day of June, the year of our Lord, 2025. It is 8 o'clock a.m. Holly is in Kenya looking at beasts. And the puppy Cleo. Oh, Holly is in Kenya looking at beasts, but is joining us.
Hello. How are you? Can you hear me?
We can. I was just explaining that you weren't here.
Well, I am because, the magic of the modernity and the communications and all of those things.
So,
So
um, are you are you staying in a tent, or are you
it is a tent. It's a very glamorous tent. So it has a thatched roof over it. It has a deck. It has a full bathroom. It has electricity and plumbing. So it's a
kind of
tent with a
cool?
bathroom. Yeah. So this is
And
this is Kenya hospitality. So
what prevents wild beasts of the sort that you are there to see from leaping through the fabric and devouring you?
well, there's a fence around the lodge. So there's antelopes and certain, although they keep the monkeys at bay here really well. I haven't seen any monkey. Some of the lodges, the monkey assault is intense. And in fact, we've had monkeys break into our tent before at other places. But this place, they have this on lock. They must have some like seriously accomplished they have slingshot guys at these places to keep the monkeys at bay, and they must have some seriously talented slingshot guys or something,
Talented
because I
slingshot
haven't even
guys
seen.
or something because I haven't even seen.
Oh, now I hear myself.
Oh, now I
That's
hear
not good.
myself. That's not good.
It's okay.
Can you hear
Um,
me still?
I hear you just fine. I think Mike Pesca can hear you.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I may
and
have I may
Hi,
have
Mike
done that.
Pesca.
I may have done
Are
the
you the
I can hear
official?
myself.
Are you the official guest today,
I'm official.
Mike?
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
Oh,
he's
okay.
bona fide.
I'm
You're
not
like
official.
you're like kind of an interloper who just showed up in the middle of the monologue,
Okay,
which
but
was
you
kind of
love it. Come on,
I
you
do
love
love
it.
it. Should
Yeah.
I
How
finish?
how are my babies, by the way? How are my
Your
babies?
babies are fine. The cactus says that the sun is shining and the birds are chirping, and you're watching
Did you
dog
charge
shirt.
him?
No, 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 no.
Oh,
I've left him good and dead. Um, the snowman is enjoying the
the
cactus's
silence.
demise. Yeah.
Got
But
it.
I want you all to know um, that, and this is an important point, about the UN General Assembly resolution adopted by the General Assembly on the 6th of December 2016, which is General Assembly Resolution 7190 on international cooperation in the peaceful uses of outer space, which emphasizes the significant progress in the development of space science and technology that have enabled humans to explore the universe, recognizing the unique platform at the global level for
Hmm.
international cooperation in space activities, blah, 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 uh, and declaring the 30th of June to be International Asteroid Day. Um,
Oh,
and so it has been ever since. And I do think all of the asteroids in response to this resolution got together and decided that when they hit the Earth in a civilization destroying kind of way, it's going to be on June 30th because
mm.
that's their day. Um, and so,
Ben, it
while
sounds
the
like
sun is
you.
shining, the birds are chirping, and it's going to be a great fucking day, and you're watching Dog Shirt TV, and it's a goddamn revolution in morning television. Keep in mind that the asteroids know, and they're coming for us. and, you know, don't
I
look up.
think Ben, I think with that prediction, that brilliant, the level of specificity and information behind it, I think you're ready to become an evangelical prophet. So,
But I haven't asked for money.
well, I mean, that's the next thing to do. So first you
All
get
right,
your
y'all,
prophecy
I
down.
see.
You get it down first, and then you
y'all
ask for
should
money.
y'all should send me money, people.
The doomsday cult that
Well, they
could never be
subscribe to your
disproved.
newsletter, so they've already sent your
Right.
money. They've already sent you money anyway. Well, I don't
All
mean to
right.
interrupt the official proceedings, so I just
No,
thought I'd say hello.
you are welcome to interrupt any time.
Holly,
Keep
what
sending me the
apparatus is
beast.
that?
What?
Holly is on safari in
I'm
Kenya.
in Kenya,
Yeah,
and this
it's
is
like
my
it's a
tent.
tent of sorts,
It's a
a
glam.
makeshift
It's
tent.
no. This is a luxury tent with a
That's
bathroom
good.
in it, with plumbing and electricity. Yeah, and a roof overhead. So
Holly
anyway,
is glamping her way through being
not even
acting
glamping. I don't
beastmaster.
do I don't even do glamping, but we've had tremendous luck so far. We've only been on 2 game runs, and we've seen we've hit it out of the park. So all of the people who've come on this trip are thrilled with me, even though I've done nothing, and the drivers. And
Isn't there?
and
Is
so
there
it's
some
gone.
debate? Is there some debate about which the fifth of the big five is, or which it should be?
No, there's no debate. No, there's no debate. The big 5 are elephant, Cape buffalo,
What are the big
um,
five?
I'm telling you, elephant, Cape buffalo, rhino, lion, and leopard. And the reason those are the big 5 is because back in the days when people hunted, that's what they wanted to hunt. But according to tourists, the buffalo should probably be replaced by the cheetah in terms of levels of excitement. Because you see a ton of buffalo, it's not that exciting. But you see a cheetah, and that's big excitement. We've seen a cheetah already, so that's big excitement. So
What I've got going.
are
Well, we
you
now
Look at
have
this.
have you
multiple
see
doubled
this?
Mike
yourself?
Pescas.
Yeah.
This is unnerving.
I'm
It's
I
kind
don't
of
know
like
about this.
I got a whole thing. You got exciting things going on with Cape Buffaloes, but I got some stuff going on with technology and my cat.
Oh.
I got a little 5. My cat has caused a tremendous amount of consternation by spilling an entire cup of coffee. But wait a minute,
Oh.
Holly.
Yeah.
The hippo is not part of the big 5, and people want to see a
No.
hippo.
They do, but they're easy to see.
No,
They also will kick your ass. Hippo are mean. If you go on terms of meanness, the big 5 are hippo, Cape buffalo, elephant. Lions can get very angry. And I don't know, baboons. Baboons are like assholes. I hate those things. So those are the big 5 in terms of
you're an
meanness.
intelligence officer, so lions can get very angry. It's very useful.
I was.
Well, I just
would
want to
not
say
anymore.
that hippos kill more people in Africa than any other animal save one, and the one is the mosquito, which is by far the
most deadly.
the winner.
Yeah.
I was just telling this to my kids. I was like, whenever you come up with a stat like that, there's always the rub, and the rub is man. Except for man.
That's true.
Also, don't say human. In this case, is the one case where you could say man.
Yes, that's correct.
But we have here
Holly,
in Kenya, we have low risk of malaria. So the mosquitoes in Kenya, at least in the Kenya highlands where we are, there's no risk where we are right now. We're going down a little bit lower to Samburu, Tabaro, which is semi-desert. It's a lower elevation. There's a slight risk there, but compared to the coast and West Africa and Congo and many other low-lying places, Kenya is, well, except for the coast, and much of Kenya is high altitude, and the malarial risk is low to 0. So, and the weather is perfect. Perfect weather.
I will just say that the mosquitoes in Washington, there is one strain that carries Trumpism, and there is another strain that carries Trump derangement syndrome, and you got to watch out for it.
Yeah, I've been. Mosquitoes love me.
Also deadly in Kenya is the government now. They're cracking down on protesters who are upset about this finance bill, aren't they? Have you seen any of that?
Yeah, well, the finance bill is it started last year with the finance bill. Now they're continuing to it's a vicious cycle because they're protesting police brutality, and then the police crack down on the protesters, and then there's more police brutality, and there's more protests. It's going like that. So they've had some violent protests here, but we're fine. So we haven't been affected at all. So
wait,
but it is very sad.
This is your area of expertise, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so should we, if we're people of good morality and we want the best outcomes and we want to decry bad governments, is there some specificity to the Kenyan government that not just what they've done, but is the opposition good and the current government cracking down on the bad people?
At the moment, there's not much of an opposition because they've been brought into the government. So that's one of the problems is the protests are they're very grassroots and not directed at all. And the government, to be honest with you, the president has been pretty responsive to the protesters, but the police are really out of control. They've been a problem for a really long time. And also, I will say, and any Kenyan will tell you this. In fact, one of them told me this today. One person I talked to told me this today. The criminal elements, especially in Nairobi, of which there are many, they come out in droves when there's protests and really take advantage of the situation. And I just saw a headline that multiple women were raped the other day. I have a friend who's just an ordinary Kenyan who lives in kind of not a lower class area. And last summer when there were protests, she had to flee for her house because thieves were breaking in. So the criminal elements come out in droves and really make things much, much worse, and probably make the police response much, much worse. So I'm not excusing
Kenyan Antifa.
Yeah, it is. Only it's like way worse than that. It's real. So I'm not excusing the president because he's ultimately responsible, but it's kind of a little bit more complicated than that. And by African standards, Kenya has a democratically elected government. And again, he canceled the finance bill last year when they had these protests. He withdrew it, which was stunning. And maybe not politically smart and economically smart because they actually do need to. They're in serious debt, so they do need to do something. But it's just a little bit more complicated than just. It's not good. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely a backtrack in there. It's a backsliding in their democratic progress.
This is the kind of analysis that ends up in the PDB. It's not good. Don't get me wrong. All right.
And lions are aggressive.
And lions can get angry. Yeah. Holly, you're a great American. And you're welcome to hang around, but I am going to radically change the subject.
Before I go, I have a small beef with you. You asked me about my luggage saga. And if you were a paid subscriber to my newsletter, the way I am a paid subscriber to your newsletter, you would have known every detail of the saga because it's a very popular post, by the way, among the paid subscribers who got them.
Am I not a paid subscriber to your newsletter?
I do not think you are. So
well, that is
either that or you're not reading it. Either that or you're not reading it.
Ben showed up as a paid subscriber to the Gist list in Pesca Profundities early on, and he hasn't yet unsubscribed, which is genius.
Yeah, but
you are a subscriber, but you're not I don't think you're a paid subscriber.
That's interesting.
That's you're a paid subscriber and you don't read it.
Well, so it is true that I'm generally about 6 months behind in my Substack newsletters because they come in huge, I get like 30 of them a day and I read none of them because I'm, editing Lawfare and stuff.
No, he's like Trump. He likes a visual briefing. It has
exactly.
Yeah.
I get, that's why I have Instagram.
And I hate Instagram. And I've been throwing some stuff up there though.
And then you send me the things individually, send me the things you want me to read. And so it
I
is.
send you very few because I don't want to. I understand you're busy. You're really busy and you're doing a lot of great work out there. And really, you have better things to do. But I'm just saying, like, you had a specific question about my luggage
That was answered.
and
And look, if roles
that was
were
answered.
reversed, if roles were reversed, I would have razzed you about it. So it's right of you to razz me
I
about it.
always at least skim the dog shirt daily.
No,
I'm just saying.
you're really good about it, and yeah. So I'm totally down with being razzed about it, and I will make sure that I am a paid subscriber. I thought
Okay,
I was. Holly Berkley
I'm gonna
Fletcher,
go now.
uh, enjoy the beasts
I will,
and
Ben,
tolerate
and
the people.
enjoy your show. So, bye, Mike. Bye,
Bye,
Ben.
Holly.
Mike Pesca, how are you today? What's on your mind?
All right. Well,
I have to tell you why you're here.
yeah, I didn't know why I was here. I will tell you that before you even invited me, I was listening to an interview that you did in, I think, 2015. Pretty interesting interview that explained a lot about what's going on in Israel. It was in the Lawfare feed, a good choice.
Oh, the archive feed.
Yeah.
Chosen by our fabulous current intern, Mary Ford, who maybe we should have on the show or something. She's a very interesting and compelling person.
I have a regular segment called the Ford Foundation. And anyway, I always listen to those. I'm like, I wonder how their voices have changed. And I don't know if you could tell the difference. My voice has changed. I've gotten more casual. And when I was on NPR, maybe in 2015, I was trying to be a little more NPR-ish or formal, talk slower. Your voice has dipped a little bit. Quarter octave, is that even a thing? That's 2 notes, right? Can it dip 2 notes? So your D's are now E's or something. But your voice was slightly higher.
But is that might that be because a lot of my recordings now are done relatively early in the morning, and so like it's not usually true of the Lawfare podcast, but it's often true of well, Dog Shirt Daily is at 8 in the morning. It's often the first words I speak in a day.
Yeah. I think it's probably because our voices change. And I don't know if there's a consistency with going high or low, but I think it's probably because of familiarity or ease with the format or interviewing in general. So you're a little more pinched, let's say, you know? You're a little more, I'm not going to say uptight, but now you're totally loose, and so the voice deepens a little. Listen to Howard Stern, same exact thing happened, although I think he cultivated it. Listen to Terry Gross. Everyone's, okay, now I'm working my way into a thesis. People's voice lowers over time, even when they start off as professional broadcasters in their 30s or 40s.
That's so interesting. I have never noticed that. All right.
So why am I here?
Well, you're
Explain.
here. I am sitting in the car yesterday, driving to the cabin in the woods on my ill-fated trip to do some tiling at the cabin in the woods, which you think one cat spilling coffee on your equipment can throw things for a loop. Try bringing a puppy to a construction site.
And tiling's all interconnected. So one screw up and it's cascades, tessellation style, right?
It was not a good day, except that I did get to spend the day, 4 hours of the day driving to and from the cabin with the excellent, estimable Tamara Kaufman-Wittes, and we had a chat. And apropos of nothing whatsoever, she said to me, "How is Mike Pesca doing, by the way?" And I said, I don't know. I think he's good. I should invite him on the show. And so it was just like a reminder that you hadn't been on the show in several weeks. And so I texted you right away.
Yes.
And you agreed to be on the show this morning. And that is why you're here.
Yeah.
So you're here so that I can ask you, how are you?
I'm good. All right. See you, Ben. What was the the Nasdaq? Oh, the Nasdaq was the stock market for the next 100 years. One of these, maybe the Wall Street Journal, it used to have a slogan saying, "Actually, there's a list of it every day." The New York Stock Exchange, and so I feel that way with the Gist. How am I doing? There's a chronicle of it every day, and it's not always about me. In fact, a daily podcast probably less about me than most people. But I'm a little upset with some Supreme Court direction. I'm a little upset by some analysts of the Supreme Court. I'm certainly quite upset with some national trends, and yet I've been accused of being overly sanguine about other national trends. See how I'm not talking about myself? On a personal level, I got a kid who's going to college, which is great. I have a lot of, I'm not going to say anxiety, but you want him to do good, and you're wondering if he can. I have another kid who's going to Spain, and I had to have a nice talk to him about how not to be an ugly American, because he has this game that he plays here in New York where he goes with his friend to a Whole Foods and tries to sneak a single Belgian waffle into people's shopping carts. So I'm like, you can't do that in Spain. They sell $1.65 Belgian waffles, so they said this is perfect, and there are all these gambits to sneak it into shopping carts.
And is the idea to sneak it in and get them to pay for it?
Correct. And the question is, has it ever worked? Yes. They've seen people check out with Belgian waffles they didn't even know about.
And
so I said...
And why Belgian waffles rather than, an apple or a bottle of kombucha?
Okay, couple things. From a comedy standpoint, I think your question answers itself.
Right. Do they film it?
There's a thinness to the waffle, and many of the, we have had way too many discussions about this, one being way too many, but there's an aerodynamics to the waffle that sometimes comes into play, so that you have to toss it into a cart upon getting distracted. So I did say to Emmett, "You're getting very good at this, huh?" And he's like, "Not really. I've been kicked out twice so far."
Wow, this is excellent.
Yeah.
But
I also asked ChatGPT if it's illegal.
That filming it and put that this is like an Instagram feed waiting to happen.
Right. He's a purist and he just likes it for the love of the game. But I'm like, yeah, it is. It could be content, if you get good at it. Yeah.
In fact, it could be like a Gist list extra.
The Belgian waffle
today's
updates.
Emmett attempt to.
I don't know if he's good at it. I hope he's good at it. We only could tell if after every attempt there has to be a running tally, number of waffles bought and number of times kicked out of the store. Yeah. I would think that, if he gets good enough at it, there'll be some rumors that Whole Foods is in cahoots with him, because really it doesn't hurt them. People buy an extra Belgian waffle.
No, it's not shoplifting. That's kind of what's awesome about it.
I asked ChatGPT, is it illegal? And they said no, although if you target an individual over and over, it could be harassment. Like, it's almost worth it to try to get that charge as the first person who harassed person via a $1.65 Belgian waffle.
But what would be fabulous is if he organized 30 people to go to 30 different Whole Foods all over the city and see the diversity of human experience when you do
good. Yeah, in the name of social science. I was thinking you were maybe going for do it for a cause, Ukraine one day, or
no.
Against common
I think
carriers.
one of the things about random mischief and mayhem of a should be for no cause.
Correct.
It's just, look, you do lots of things for Ukraine and for the homeless, but forcing unknowing people to buy Belgian waffles isn't one of them.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you asked me on. Could I just ask you some questions? Because I was like, I should ask Ben questions that tap directly into his expertise. This is not general questions. These are literally about your subject area expertise.
All right, go ahead.
There are 18 intelligence agencies. I know one of them is Coast Guard intelligence, so that they're not going to do a bomb damage assessment unless, I guess, if the Coast Guard ship got bombed or bombed someone. Does the Coast Guard own bombs? That's not my question. And then there's, of course, this leak that comes out, and then there was another intercept of Iranian intelligence, an overheard conversation. I just want your general thoughts on I'll just lay the predicate. How seriously should we take those? Because obviously behind every leak there is some motivation, and the motivation could be someone with inside the intelligence apparatus wanting to emphasize that this early assessment, which was low confidence, shows that bad things happen. And then I'm wondering about, or the bad things didn't happen enough, wanting to undercut Trump, wanted to stop the march to war, or wanted like a natural corrective to the talk of obliteration. And then give me your assessment if you've read up on the Iranian call intercept. I immediately said, all right, there's some value to that as far as it goes, but aren't you blowing? It seems to me that you're blowing sources by making that public. And for what? To undercut, I guess someone within the administration could think it's important enough, but to undercut potential U.S. policy. So what's your analysis of how seriously we should take all the intel leaks?
I would say take all as data points, but don't take any seriously as authoritative on its own. So I think what's clear is that the word obliterated, completely obliterated, was totally irresponsible. And by the way, it is kind of impossible to totally obliterate a program. A mountain. Well, and a program that ultimately lives in the written records of probably a bunch of computers, right?
Yeah.
And also in the heads of people, some of whom you killed, but some of whom you didn't. And by the way, making a nuclear bomb is not the hardest. I mean, we did it 75 years ago.
That's why we say things like it's not brain surgery and it's not rocket science, it's not nuclear technology.
Exactly, right? And so, like, the idea that the program was going to be destroyed once and for all was always fanciful, right? The question is, how long did you set it back?
Right.
And did you set it back long enough so that with other political pressures and with the threat of further military actions, you might politically persuade the Iranian regime to abandon it, which is the only way that it's going to disappear. And so you're talking about a gradation that, let's say, operates in months. The more conservative estimates say it was set back a few months. The more aggressive, responsible estimates say it was set back a few dozen months.
Oh.
Right.
What do we usually call those units of time?
Yeah, exactly. Years, right? Yeah. I'm just sticking with the measure of months.
Yes.
And so, first of all, anytime you have a spectrum like that in intelligence in which there's no formal U.S. intelligence assessment, and where there is, you have to ask whether you believe it. But, it's worth just assuming that there's a lot of I don't knows embedded in wherever somebody drops the needle. And my assumption is that any program like this is replaceable. It's just a question of how much time. It is certainly true that the Israelis are completely delighted with the success of their operation.
Right.
Which, by the way, is a different way of assessing it than the intelligence assessment.
Right.
They said, what are our specific military goals? They laid out a bunch of specific military goals. They appear to have accomplished all of them with greater completeness than they expected. And I think that would push the needle toward effectiveness.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
perhaps near obliteration, obliteration.
Oblit, on the other hand, the Iranian interception does suggest, and those things can be faked, by the way, not by the intelligence community, but you have a fake phone call in order to put out disinformation, knowing that it's going to be intercepted.
Right.
And so, that would suggest a certain caution. The fact that DIA, with low confidence, and other intelligence agencies with way too high confidence that's completely politically motivated seem to disagree, suggests caution is appropriate. And my view is we should assume it set them back to some degree, and that creates some opportunities.
Yeah.
That's
So
the most I know how to say. And
everything you're saying makes sense. But what about isn't it a pretty huge step, and not just a violation of technical law, to blow your operation that was intercepting communication among the Iranians if the intelligence person thinks it's legitimate? Like, don't they know? Don't those individuals then know to go back, and they know what they were talking on when they were talking on it, and they know that they can't talk on that again?
yes,
Yeah.
whenever you release intelligence at that kind of level of specificity, you are potentially or really compromising what what in the art is called sources and methods, but is often stated as though it's sources and methods, as though it's one word.
Right.
In
The
this
Medicare
case,
and Medicaid of spycraft.
right. In this case, it's not a source; it's a method.
Yeah.
And now um, and this is a persistent problem and has implications for intelligence leaks.
Yeah. And now the Israelis do this all the time, but I get the sense that it's less members of the Israeli intelligence community going rogue. I mean, it's smaller, they have more eye on the ball, and there's probably less fractures within it, although they're Israelis, there are probably many fractures. I wondered about that. I wondered, what's the net benefit? Do you think it's an early on data point that agrees with the low assessment DNI, or it has some argument that the strike didn't go as far as obliteration, which, by the way, if you think the digging in was at Fordo, it was Donald Trump says something blustery, and then his entire controlled apparatus has to back up that exact bluster. This is something that we've been through again and again.
Right.
And we're debating the vocabulary of Trump, which is, I think, what we like most in America. I mean, that's most of what we do is debating
It's
the
our
words
main
that he says.
recreational activity.
Pretty much. It's like watching the NFL now is forensic videography. Just, I guess they decided people like watching replays over and over to see if the guy's foot was in. This is what America has become, just debating the exact words he used. Yeah. So anyway, that is all going on. My assessment of the whole thing, the whole months, I love to know how many, but I also understand the intelligence community can't say 2. But if it's the breakout time was originally months, and if that was 10, and then the bombing added months to that, and that was 10, now you've added a year and a half or so, and in terms of everything that's going on in the world, from diplomacy to the Ayatollah's actual lifespan, you've done something, right?
Right.
It's 2 and 2.
No,
You haven't done much.
I mean, I am. My view of this is, I support it completely as long as it's effective,
Yeah.
and the blowback is minimal, and oppose it completely if either of those is not true.
Yeah.
And I do think so far the blowback has been minimal, and there does seem to be some degree of effectiveness. And so, look, this program was a real problem. The Israelis were going to hit it eventually, and if the question is limited to should we do one strike on Fordo, Like, I don't think that that's the worst thing in the world to have done, and I'm not shedding any tears over whatever, happy to pocket whatever damage was done. I'm
Right.
also think it's important to say that the president shouldn't be out there claiming like the, something that may have extended, bought us a few months of time is, the frickin' Normandy landing, right?
Hmm.
And, you use words like total obliteration. We're used to it with Trump, but it's actually an appalling thing to do. And so I'm not, I don't want to I don't want to be effusive in praise of it by any means, but I also don't um I don't you know we were going to face this question whether Joe Biden was president or Kamala Harris was president or Donald Trump was president or Ron DeSantis was president. And the relevant question to me is how much time do you buy us and at what cost? And so far, the cost appears to be quite low, and the time appears to be
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Yeah, my analysis too. I mean, as long as you buy us enough time for the forthcoming Mamdani presidency, that will be the big game
Not
changer.
to mention the asteroid that's going to hit either today or is going to wait until a year from today
But yeah.
because,
By
it
the
is
way,
going to happen June 30th.
did you see the briefing that Kane and Hegseth? Let's put aside Hegseth; he was just angry. He was doing a big media critique, but they showed the video of the mob going into the ground, and I literally thought it was for some reason a black and white computer graphic. It looked like the flight to the moon that Lumiere brothers. Actually, it was Mizel. Is that how you say it? It looked like a cartoon from the 1910s. The mop penetrating the ground. It was unbelievable.
I did not see that because the whole principle that I don't listen to Donald Trump's voice extends to Pete Hegseth.
Oh, so Hegseth being next to Kane. Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's true.
just I deal with them all in writing only.
That's
Um,
smart. Oh,
so
let me just say, my whole thing with this is, and this you ask how I was doing on the show, as I kept saying, we have to keep in mind the cost and the benefit. I think the either most extreme or most worried voices, and there's some value to them, got both those things wrong. It seems like the cost is it's valid to worry about what could happen in quagmires and slippery slopes, but also the United States has done, let's not call it surgical strikes, but we've done strikes and then not got pulled into conflicts. So the costs, no cost in life. Every mop bomb cost $5 million, and to fly those missions cost like $30 million. So we could add that. The costs seem to have been exaggerated, and perhaps the benefits. I would say surely the benefits, if you're saying obliterated, has seemed to be exaggerated. And
no, but I
say,
think you got to measure the costs over time because
Yeah.
one of the things that, Iran is really willing to do is wait a while and then, attack the Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires
Right.
in response.
If they
And
have the capacity still. And I remember interviewing Fred Kaplan after Soleimani was killed, and I was asking about this, and he said something like that, like they have long-term capacity and they stew on this. And so far, I haven't seen it with him and with Soleimani. I think that taking him off I couldn't make this analysis for the first few years. But here
Right.
we are, many years hence, and it seems like to have been a benefit. And from what I read from smart, unbiased, or as unbiased as you could be people, is that, yes, eliminating him advanced the cause of making the world a little bit safer on net.
Right. So the question, I think there's two long-term or maybe medium-term costs that we don't know the answer to. So one is what happened to the enriched uranium, and do they take this as an opportunity for a covert breakout that either we can't detect or we can't realistically do very much about? And so what you've actually done is you've destroyed a large portion of the program, but you've left enough of it and you've created a political incentive structure for them to become North Korea.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a long-term cost or a medium-term cost.
But more so than they were 5 weeks ago?
Well, so that, that gets to the question of who's the you in this, right? Is the you, because it's very clear to me that Trump did not want to do this until the Israelis were doing it anyway, right? And, did Netanyahu do this and then brought Trump along for the ride, for the Fordo ride? Or is this a thing where the marginal impact of the U.S. involvement did that? I suspect we will never know the answer to that question.
Right. And then when you sell Trump on, we get to call it Midnight Hammer, he gets very excited.
Right. The other possibility is, right, pulling off a terrorist attack against Jewish targets in Europe is pretty easy.
Yeah.
And
maybe in Glastonbury, from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, but you don't even need the Iranian for that.
Just one charismatic musical performer. Yeah.
Right. So I think it is worth being circumspect about it. I'm sure as hell not going to denounce it. I'm also not going to spend any time conflating my hopes and my analysis for what it accomplished, if anything.
Yeah. Can I continue in this vein or similar veins?
I love
tapping your expertise.
You've just hijacked the hosting duties of this. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. What hope is there for any reform on AUMF? If it's not, I understand the politics aren't lined up and there is a minority of Democrats, but I talked to Chris Murphy on the show years ago, and there's always this nation sense that we're still operating under giving the president full leeway post 9/11, and that's not right, and that's not good. And you'll even get Republicans, well, depending on the administration, you get bipartisan agreements. It seems like this wasn't the time for a number of reasons, and I would say maybe after a specific military action is when there's the most momentum, but also the least momentum, especially if the military action went kind of well. So this maybe is more of a legislative strategy question, but how can it ever get done? What's the means? Do we need like a calm period and then people coming together and saying we're going to redo the authorization of military force? Would the calm period mean that no one has the urgency to do it? How does it ever get done?
So did you know that there was an authorization to use military force, including nuclear weapons, to protect the island of Taiwan? That was only removed from the books repealed a few years ago. It was passed to deter the Chinese in the late 50s under the Eisenhower administration, and it just sat there on the books for like 40, 50 years.
Is there one against asteroids, including nuclear weapons?
I query whether you need one against asteroids, because, if ever you could say there was an imminent self-defense argument, the asteroid hurtling toward the Earth.
Then again, maybe we could just unlock their assets and they would give up their
you just freeze their assets. Of course, it's already freezing on the asteroid. Look, I think the authorization I think it's a very difficult problem to resolve. I think the conditions in which it could be resolved are opposite party control of at least one, maybe both houses of Congress from the president, B, a period of calm so that there's a reasonable argument that the president doesn't need the existing set of authorizations, and C, a president, enough mistrust of the president's intentions that you're afraid of how he might use this. The president, for all the loose talk about this attack being unlawful. That is probably clearly true under international law.
Yeah.
It
I heard your next day report with who was your esteemed guest who was great on that.
Marty Lederman.
Yes, and that guy is such a great Marty Lederman.
Yeah.
That
Marty
guy's name was
Lederman,
Trevor. It would
he
not be
is
as good.
unusually good at being Marty Lederman.
Yeah.
He is also really, really smart. Look, this is a position that the executive branch has taken for a long time. It's how we got to Libya. It's how we got to Kosovo without congressional authorizations. I mean, there are these, things we do from the air that you're not tying to any, and am I comfortable with it as a matter of constitutional law? No. I think it's bad. Is it unique to the Trump administration? No. Is it ripe for particular abuse by an authoritarian administration? Yeah. Were a lot of people, a lot of presidents, and by the way, a lot of Congresses complicit in getting us here? Yeah. And so I don't think even absent an authorization, even if you had done the authorization for use of military force back when Tim Kaine really wanted to do it, it wouldn't have stopped this, because any president who's going to do this is going to be comfortable with an Article 2 rationale for doing it.
And you could argue shouldn't have stopped this. Like, it becomes an exact proxy for if you think the strike was wise or not, if you think it should have been legal or not under a different AUMF. By the way,
one other thing on this point. The right process for this, if you think about this in how U.S. government should work terms, and again, this is all on the domestic law side, not on the international law side. The right way to have handled it would have been, as the Israelis started going, as the calls for a Fordo operation mounted, and as the president was not willing to reject it and not willing to say, no, under no circumstances are we getting involved, to go to Congress and say, hey, guys, I need an emergency authorization to use force so that I have the tool in my toolkit in these negotiations with the Iranians. That is what George W. Bush did in the Iraq War. Nobody gives him credit for anything related to the Iraq War anymore. I want to give him credit for that. He said, I need this tool in my toolbox.
And how did he convince them to give it to him? Yeah.
Well, with a lot of political pressure.
Yeah, but also Colin Powell at the UN and some, sexy dossiers and cooked books and so forth.
There's no political solution.
Right.
That's perfect. Right. What I'm saying
is, Obama went, am I right?
Obama went in Syria and
he wanted to be told no, I would think.
I think he wanted to be told yes, actually.
Oh, really?
And then he didn't do the operation because of it. That's the risk, right?
Right.
And I do think, we should give Bush credit for following the constitutional process as we would want it. Now, the quality of the information was inadequate. Colin Powell's, UN presentation was factually all over, deeply flawed, yellow cake uranium, blah, blah, blah. But that's the last time a president followed the process. And I do think we should look back on that and say, okay, there's lots to object to about the Iraq War, but one of the things was not the way the president resorted to force.
Yeah. Oh, that would be a great book. We need maybe 10 more years. The toing and froing on the wisdom of Obama and going into Syria, was by a certain set of internationalists, a great stand in his presidency because of the horrible humanitarian crisis and more refugees than any other time since World War II. But, cut to 2025, maybe Syria is on a path to saving itself. Maybe you could look back and rewrite the what if of the history and saying a U.S. intervention would have been much worse than what eventually came out. I don't know. Can I ask you something, though? Kosovo, that wasn't a NATO joint operation?
It was a NATO joint operation, but that's an international law matter, right? It didn't have any specific congressional authorization.
Oh, so do other NATO countries have to get authorization from their country?
That's just a matter of their own constitutional law.
Interesting.
Right. So,
Yeah.
Our rule is if the president resorts to force overseas, it either has to be a matter of inherent Article 2 authority or there has to be an authorization. You can't just say because I feel like it.
Huh. So some of our NATO allies, which, this might not be fair, but sometimes get held up as a little less bellicose and more advanced than us, they don't even have that. They could just, boom, the executive could just go to war.
I don't know the answer to that. I know the rule under Israeli law, which is that the power resides in the government, which is the collective subset of the Knesset that functions as the executive branch. You generally don't need a specific Knesset authorization, right? But the resort to force power relies. And I do believe in Britain there had to be, in the UK, there had to be votes in Parliament on certain things. But I don't know, it's very specific from country to country. And of course, in Germany, it's forbidden as a matter of constitutional law, irrespective of what anybody does,
Right.
unless Germany is attacked, right? So it's super, super variable.
Yeah. I am speaking to the Lithuanian ambassador to Russia, former Lithuanian ambassador to Russia, in a couple hours, so maybe. But they weren't in NATO back in the 90s, so can't really ask him.
Yeah, so a lot of countries in Europe that are NATO members, I think, have a more collective, have law that is a little bit more cognizant of the collective responsibilities of their alliances. Ours, of course, predates our alliances by some nearly 200 years. So the law it's a little bit of a mismatch.
So
Mishmash.
how do you can I continue with the hijacking, or do you have an agenda?
Sure.
Okay. So because, I might play this as my Saturday show. It's so educational. I sometimes do. Have you done a Substack Live yet?
I have done a Substack Live,
I saw
and
that.
Substack Lives are great fun. The problem with them, the reason I don't do Dog Shirt TV on Substack Live is that there is a limit to how many people can be on a Substack Live at the same time.
Right.
I think it's only 3. And I have a rule that, first of all, the audience is allowed to interrupt at any time, which means people need to be able to pop up on screen. And I also have a rule that all of my co-hosts are invited all the time. And so
Right.
sometimes
That's
we
true.
have, just me and you as a guest. We've even had shows which are super uncomfortable where I'm here by myself and I'm just
Tap dancing.
tap dancing and but Substack Live just isn't capable of handling that, but it is a wonderful platform now, and it's very good for audience development.
Yes. This is Substack Live-esque, except we're doing it on decent cameras, and they make you do it on your phone.
Right.
So, because they want it to be all casual, but it's like imposing the casualness on people who are professional broadcasters. Who does it help? I guess Substack. So this is Substack Live-y. I did a spiel the other day on my growing impatience or just criticism of international law, and it wasn't anything to do with any of the context we're talking about. I was going to ask you a trivia question, but it's too obscure. It was to deal with international law and Haiti And Haiti is using drones because they're besieged by gangs. And so drones are these new tools. And usually, interestingly, right, it's when you have an imbalance of power, a way to balance out the power is the less potent side uses drones, although Russia uses them a lot too. Anyway, the Haitian government is using drones against gangs. And it doesn't seem to be going great, but then again, it's a big uphill climb. And the headline in the New York Times, depending on if you read it online or in print, was likely to be illegal under international law or might be illegal, but they were saying it's illegal. And the reason it's illegal, you probably know this, is you have to satisfy two criteria. One, is it a real problem going on? Yes, there's a real problem going on with the gangs in Haiti. And two, does your enemy have a clear command and control structure? And the enemy of the Haitian government are gangs. I guess the leader of the gangs is this guy named Barbecue. So Barbecue is not in uniform, and Barbecue is not giving marching orders to steak tidbits and flank steak or whatever. And so therefore it might be out of compliance with international law. And so I did a spiel saying, come on, international law, what are you doing? You got to rethink what's going on if this is your stance that the Haitian government can't use drones against Barbecue. But what are your thoughts, just based on everything I've briefed you on so far?
Okay, so I have not studied this particular problem and therefore have no opinion about the appropriate use of drones in an intrastate conflict with a criminal organization that actually does threaten to has destabilized the regime and threatens further destabilization of the regime.
Yeah, I would go beyond to say the regime, right? Like
the society, right?
Yeah, any fair assessment of society, right? Correct.
I am instinctively suspicious of almost all law of armed conflict commentary about the use of drones that is not because this particular world of international law was grotesquely ideological from the beginning and is overly conditioned by the desire to prevent the United States from killing terrorists associated with Al-Qaeda in the Fatah regions of Pakistan and the tribal areas of Yemen. And so I do think this body of thought, into a large degree, has is sipped from a very poisoned ideological chalice early on and has basically gotten everything wrong. That's my prejudice.
This is the greatest answer I've ever gotten. I didn't know what you were going to say. I thought you were going to say you have to be very worried about a government using little drones. Yeah.
No.
Quadcopters.
I think you have to so this is a subject that, goes back to early lawfare history. And, I actually did an Oxford Union debate, which I lost, by the way. But and I've been bitter about it ever since. I even put on a fucking tux for it. If I ever do another Oxford Union debate, it's going to be in a dog shirt. But I defended the moral propriety of the use of drones back when it was really unpopular, and I was overwhelmingly outvoted by the students of Oxford.
Was the proposal, this House believes
I commend
Al-Qaeda deserves it.
I commend to people my speech, which I stand by. That said, and I'm not saying it is good for the Haitian government to be using drones.
Right.
I don't know what they're doing with them,
right.
But I do think we should start with a healthy suspicion of a lot of international law scholarship in this area. Number two.
What a great answer.
Do not dismiss international law on the basis of dissatisfaction with the way lefty law professors and organizations understand the law of armed conflict. Every plane that takes off at Newark Airport that lands in a different country can do so because of international law. Everything you buy that was made somewhere else is an expression that those trade relations are an expression of international law. And so I think it is really worth separating the international law of war and peace, which can be a real mess, from the international law of day-to-day life, in which we are all operating in a fabric of such complexity that it is that it has become invisible,
Yeah.
and yet it is no less real because it is invisible.
Brilliant point, and it gets down to basic philosophy of contracts on the flights taking on and off and everything adhering to standards when it's traded internationally. Both sides are highly incentivized. It's the classic win-win positive sum total. Whereas with the law of armed conflict, it's very much not always the case that is true. And like
absolutely right. And also that it is so in distinguish between international law where the law is so in everybody's interest for it to work that they implement it through all kinds of domestic legislation. And so you're not really aware of following that you're guided by international law. What you're aware of is that you got on an airplane and FAA regs says the plane has to do X and Y and Z. And by the way, those FAA regs incorporate all kinds of obligations made in the when a plane takes off from Newark Treaty, right? And so like international law is a super, super complicated animal. You got to distinguish between public international law and private international law. You also have to distinguish between the powers that are implemented through agreements that are implemented through domestic legislation or regulations and those that aren't. And you gotta do, you gotta distinguish between instruments that are kind of aspirational, like we're gonna prevent this powerful state from invading Ukraine, and those that are that have more plausible and obvious mechanisms of actual enforcement.
Right. Agreed.
Folks,
but we're both against mustard gas, yes?
we are against mustard gas, and interestingly,
Yes.
mustard gas, the Chemical Weapons Treaty,
Yep.
which, you wouldn't think would work, because it actually kind of works. Mostly states don't use chemical weapons.
Yeah, they use those chlorine
exceptions.
bombs, but I think it's more like those contracts. I think it's more like mutual self-interest contract.
It's also
law.
that they're super ineffective weapons, as it turns out.
The wind. You don't want a weapon where the wind blows one way and it kills your own forces.
I'm going to leave you guys with a parable of international law. It is the late 19th century, and the Tsar of all Russias, Nicholas II, has a vision of the future, and he is horrified by it. And that vision of the future is people dropping bombs from lighter than air aircraft, balloons, dirigibles, and you could just fly over the other side and drop bombs on them, and it would be super, super unfair. It would be a nightmare. And so in the Hague Ground Warfare Resolution, the Russians got the world to sign on, as part of the Hague Resolution, to the Anti-Balloon Warfare Convention. And the United States is a party to it.
Yeah.
And that is why we use drones, aircraft, spaceships, but we do not use balloons or lighter than air aircraft to drop bombs, because we are still, to this day, party to the Balloon Warcraft Convention. And that is why when Hitler and Churchill went to war in the Battle of Britain. They only used airplanes and even V-2 rockets. There were no balloons.
It's a civilized man would never resort to a dirigible. Yes.
Mike Pesca, you're a great American. You've hijacked my show, and it's terrific. We're gonna be back tomorrow, folks, because Holly's abandoned me to hang out with the beasts. We're gonna be doing a lot of guests this week, so stay tuned tomorrow.
Can I plug the gist list?
Oh yes.
Yes. So I have this daily newsletter where we track down and resuscitate the best news of the day with my commentary. It's on Substack, Mike Pesca Substack.
And it is recommended on Dog Shirt Daily, and I will even include it in this week, in today's, I'll include it specifically on, with a plug on today's, or tomorrow morning's, Dog Shirt. Folks, we're 5 minutes over and we never do that. We're going to be back. Goodbye.